Hey guys, tonight we're going to venture behind the grand tapestries and towering walls of a medieval castle into the very heart of royal power. We often picture medieval kings as absolute rulers and their advisors as wise, venerable figures wielding immense influence. But what if I told you that being a medieval king's advisor was actually terrible for your health? I mean, truly terrible. We're talking about a level of stress, danger, and backstabbing that, frankly, you probably wouldn't survive a single year of. It's a side of medieval power that's far less glamorous and much more deadly. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're listening, drop a comment with your location and what time it is there. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You find yourself transported to a dimly lit chamber in a medieval European castle, perhaps in 13th century France or England. The air is cold, thick with the scent of damp stone, wood smoke, and the faint, unsettling aroma of intrigue. You are no longer just an observer. You are a king's advisor, a powerful noble, a trusted cleric, or perhaps a shrewd commoner who has risen through the ranks to gain the ear of the monarch. Your proximity to power is intoxicating, but also profoundly dangerous. The first, most pervasive reality you face is a throne's shadow, constant peril. Imagine waking up every morning not with thoughts of breakfast, but with the chilling realization that today could be the day someone tries to kill you. This wasn't a hypothetical fear. It was a grim, daily reality for medieval advisors. The higher you climbed, the greater the number of envious eyes watching your every move, eager for your downfall. Who were these would-be threats? The dangers came from every conceivable direction, turning the royal court into a viper's nest of ambition, jealousy, and desperation. First, there were the rivals at court. The king's favor was a finite resource, and every advisor had competitors, powerful nobles, ambitious younger courtiers, and even other clerics vied constantly for influence, land, and royal patronage. They wouldn't hesitate to spread malicious rumors, fabricate accusations, or outright slander your name to undermine your standing with the king. Imagine trying to navigate a social minefield where a casual conversation could be misconstrued, or a minor mistake could be twisted into a treasonous act by someone eager to replace you. Your closest friends might be plotting your downfall, making trust a rare and dangerous commodity. Then, there were the king's enemies, internal and external. If you were seen as a key architect of royal policy, perhaps advocating for a new tax, a foreign alliance, or a military campaign, you would draw the ire of disgruntled nobles, rebellious vassals, or rival kingdoms. They might target you for assassination, kidnapping, or public humiliation to weaken the king's authority, or to remove a political obstacle. Your life was not just your own. It was a symbol of the king's power, and therefore a prime target for anyone seeking to challenge it. You'd have to constantly be on guard, wary of strangers, and even more wary of seemingly friendly overtures that could hide a poisoned chalice or a hidden dagger. And then, perhaps most terrifyingly, there was the king himself. Medieval monarchs were often volatile, unpredictable, and absolute in their power. Their moods could swing wildly, fueled by stress, illness, or simple caprice. A bad mood, a perceived insult, a failed policy even if it wasn't your fault, or was even your advice in the first place, or simply a change of mind could lead to your abrupt and devastating downfall. A king might suddenly dismiss you from office, confiscate your lands and wealth, imprison you in a damp dungeon, or even have you executed on a whim, all without trial or justification. You were entirely at his mercy, a servant whose life hung by the thinnest thread of royal favor. Imagine giving advice you believed was sound, only for the king to fly into a rage, and suddenly your future, your family's future, hung by a single terrifying word from the throne. While historical accounts from chronicles often highlight royal capriciousness, historians debate the true frequency and motivation behind arbitrary dismissals or executions of advisors, though the underlying potential for them was a constant and terrifying reality. Poison was another insidious, constant threat. In an age without forensic science, a sudden illness could easily be attributed to natural causes. Even if a rival had slipped a deadly concoction into your wine or food, you'd develop a profound paranoia, becoming suspicious of every meal, every shared cup, every gift from those you distrusted. You might employ food tasters or simply become incredibly wary, leading to a life of constant anxiety. A cough, a stomach ache, a fever. Any symptom could trigger a chilling fear that you were being slowly eliminated by unseen hands. You lived in a perpetual state of heightened alert, your nerves frayed by constant anxiety. Sleep was likely restless, haunted by nightmares of court intrigue or the king's sudden wrath. Every summons from the monarch, every late-night visitor would send a jolt of fear through you, wondering if this was the moment your world would come crashing down. This constant grinding fear, the ever-present knowledge that your life hung by a thread, was a direct assault on your mental and physical health, ensuring that a throne's shadow truly earned its name, casting a constant peril over your every waking moment. It makes your own job stress seem like a relaxing holiday, doesn't it? You felt the chilling grip of a throne's shadow, knowing that danger lurked in every corner of the court. This constant external threat was magnified by the ultimate reality of medieval governance, the king's whim. Power without recourse. For a medieval king's advisor, the monarch's absolute and often unpredictable authority meant that your power, your position, and your very life hung by a precarious thread, entirely subject to his unpredictable moods and decisions. Imagine yourself a high-ranking advisor standing before the king in his great hall. You might be presenting a crucial report on the state of the treasury, offering strategic advice on a military campaign, or attempting to mediate a dispute between powerful nobles. You speak with careful deference, choosing your words meticulously, knowing that every syllable carries immense weight. But no matter how logical your arguments, how wise your counsel, the ultimate decision rests solely with the king. And his decision is absolute, unquestionable, and often brutally swift. Medieval monarchs, by divine right or feudal custom, often held absolute power. There were few, if any, formal checks and balances on their authority. Unlike modern governments with constitutions and independent judiciaries, a medieval king's word was law. He could issue decrees, wage war, levy taxes, and punish his subjects, all with very little external constraint. And you, his advisor, were merely an extension of that power, serving entirely at his pleasure. This meant your position was inherently precarious. Your power was delegated, not inherent. You held influence only because the king chose to grant it to you. If his mood shifted, if a rival whispered a convincing slander, or if a policy you championed failed even due to circumstances beyond your control, your favor could vanish in an instant. Imagine being an astute political mind, watching your meticulously crafted plans crumble because the king simply changed his mind or was influenced by a jealous courtier. The unpredictability of a medieval king's temperament was a constant source of terror. Kings, burdened by immense responsibilities, often suffering from chronic illness or psychological strain, could be prone to sudden, violent rages or inexplicable shifts in opinion. A joke made in poor taste, an ill-timed suggestion, or a look interpreted as insolence could trigger a catastrophic downfall. You would constantly be studying his facial expressions, listening to the tone of his voice, trying to anticipate his moods, living in a perpetual state of anxiety. It was like living with a petulant, all-powerful toddler. Except this toddler could have you imprisoned or executed. Consider the swiftness of imperial justice. If the king decided you had displeased him, there was little to no recourse. There was no independent court to appeal to, no legal process to defend yourself. You might be arrested by royal guards, dragged from your bed in the middle of the night, and thrown into a damp, rat-infested dungeon, all on the king's personal command. Your property could be confiscated, your family ruined, and your life forfeit without a trial. Imagine the utter powerlessness, the profound injustice of knowing your fate rests entirely on the unpredictable whim of a single man. While some medieval kingdoms had nascent legal frameworks and advisory bodies, historians often debate the practical limits on a monarch's personal power, though the ultimate, often arbitrary, authority of the king over his advisors and subjects is widely acknowledged in most medieval polities. Many historical accounts are filled with examples of advisors who rose to immense power, only to fall just as spectacularly. Thomas Becket, the Archbishop of Canterbury, once a trusted advisor to King Henry II, found himself in a fatal conflict with his former friend. Hugh Despenser the Younger, a powerful favorite of Edward II, met a gruesome end when the king lost power. These stories served as chilling cautionary tales, constant reminders that proximity to the throne meant walking a tightrope over an abyss. Your life was a constant performance of loyalty and deference. You had to anticipate the king's wishes, offer advice that aligned with his often unstated desires, and always present yourself as a humble servant, never challenging his ultimate authority. You would flatter, cajole, and sometimes simply endure his unreasonable demands, knowing that your survival depended on it. It's a bit like being a high-stakes corporate executive, but instead of losing your job, you could lose your head. This pervasive reality of arbitrary power meant that even the greatest successes brought with them a lingering anxiety. You could achieve diplomatic triumphs, secure military victories, or fill the royal treasury, but your achievements were only secure as long as the king desired them to be. Your true master was not justice, or logic, or even the good of the realm, but the king's personal favor. A fickle and dangerous currency? So, as you envision the powerful medieval monarch on his throne, remember the precarious position of those closest to him. The king's whim was an absolute force, a sword of Damocles hanging over every advisor's head. Ensuring that a life of immense influence was also one of profound vulnerability and power without recourse. It truly makes you appreciate checks and balances on power, doesn't it? You felt the chilling unpredictability of the king's whim, but even for a favored advisor, life at court was no leisurely affair. It was an unending marathon of responsibility, endless toil, counsel, and campaign. From the dusty council chambers to the muddy battlefields, your life was defined by relentless demands for administrative acumen, diplomatic finesse, and often direct involvement in warfare. Imagine waking before dawn in your modest by-court standards quarters within the castle. While the king might sleep in, your day begins immediately. As a trusted advisor, you are constantly engaged in the heavy burden of administration. The medieval kingdom was a vast, sprawling entity, and every aspect of its governance demanded your attention. You'd spend countless hours poring over dusty parchment rolls, reviewing tax records, assessing land surveys, and drafting royal decrees. Imagine the sheer volume of paperwork, all done by hand, often in dim, cold chambers. Your fingers numb from the chill. You would participate in endless council meetings. These weren't quick huddles. They were often long, drawn-out affairs, lasting for hours or even days. You'd sit around a massive wooden table with other advisors, discussing everything from the price of grain in the northern provinces to the grievances of a rebellious duke. You'd be expected to offer informed opinions, debate complex issues, and articulate your advice clearly, all while navigating the unspoken rivalries and shifting alliances of your fellow courtiers. Imagine trying to stay sharp, to present compelling arguments, when your mind is weary from constant travel and lack of sleep. Beyond internal administration, you were the king's voice and mind in diplomacy. You might be dispatched on perilous journeys to foreign courts, tasked with negotiating treaties, securing alliances, or delivering sensitive messages. This meant enduring arduous travel, navigating treacherous political landscapes, and charming suspicious foreign monarchs. Imagine trying to secure a strategic marriage alliance with a volatile king, where a single misspoken word could lead to war or your own imprisonment. This wasn't a game. It was a high-stakes performance where the fate of kingdoms often rested on your ability to persuade. And then there was the constant specter of warfare. Medieval Europe was almost perpetually in conflict, whether it was defending against foreign invaders, suppressing internal rebellions, or waging war to expand the king's domains. As an advisor, you were deeply involved in the preparations. You'd be responsible for raising funds, organizing supplies, recruiting soldiers, and strategizing campaigns. Imagine the immense logistical nightmare of moving thousands of men, horses, and supplies across a medieval landscape, all without modern communication or transport. Often you were expected to accompany the king on military campaigns. This meant abandoning the relative comfort of the castle for the brutal realities of the battlefield. Your bedroom would be a damp tent, your meals simple field rations. You'd endure long marches in all weather, from scorching summer heat to freezing winter mud. You'd be exposed to the same diseases that ravaged the common soldiers: dysentery, fevers, and infections, and receive the same rudimentary medical care. Imagine trying to advise the king on battle tactics while shivering from a fever in a muddy camp, your body aching and your mind clouded by illness. The physical strain of constant travel was immense. Whether on horseback or in a bumpy, uncomfortable carriage, traversing medieval roads, which were often little more than muddy tracks for days or weeks on end, took a severe toll on your body. Chronic aches, saddle sores, and persistent fatigue were constant companions. You were always on the move, always working, always pushing your physical limits in service of the crown, while detailed daily itineraries for medieval advisors are scarce. Surviving administrative records and letters from various European courts highlight the continuous nature of royal business, often requiring extensive travel and long hours, making the idea of leisure a rare luxury. The psychological burden of these responsibilities was immense. You carried the weight of the kingdom on your shoulders, constantly making decisions that could affect millions of lives, the stability of the realm, and the king's very survival. The fear of failure, of displeasing the monarch, or of making a miscalculation that could lead to disaster was a relentless source of stress. Sleep was likely restless, haunted by the complexities of your duties. So, as you envision the powerful medieval king and his court, remember the unseen labor that kept the kingdom running? The life of a royal advisor was an endless toil, a constant demand for counsel and campaign, ensuring that even at the pinnacle of influence, your existence was a relentless grind, far from the leisurely life often imagined. It truly makes you appreciate the concept of a 9-to-5 job, doesn't it? You've experienced the endless toil of counsel and campaign, but even when you weren't battling on the frontier or poring over royal accounts, your very survival at court was a daily, high-stakes game. For the king's advisor, palace intrigue betrayal lurking everywhere was a constant, nerve-wracking reality, turning the opulent halls of the castle into a battlefield of whispers, backstabbing, and ruthless ambition. Imagine yourself in the great hall of the castle, a place that outwardly appears grand and festive, filled with courtiers in fine clothes, musicians, and the murmur of conversation. Yet, beneath the surface, a deadly game is constantly being played. Every smile might hide a dagger, every compliment a trap. Your proximity to the king's ear, your influence, your wealth, all made you a target. The primary players in this game were your rivals, other powerful nobles, ambitious younger courtiers eager to rise, even members of the king's own family. All coveted your position. They wouldn't hesitate to employ every dirty trick in the book to bring you down. This meant constant slander and rumor-mongering. Imagine baseless accusations about your loyalty, your competence, or even your morals, being whispered into the king's ear by a jealous competitor. A king, often paranoid and suspicious, might give credence to such whispers, turning his favor against you on the flimsiest of evidence. You'd have to constantly monitor the court's gossip, trying to identify and neutralize threats before they festered. It was like living in a reality TV show, but with actual life or death stakes. Espionage was rampant. Your own household staff, your personal servants, even your close confidants could be informants, secretly reporting your conversations, your habits, and your private opinions to your rivals or directly to the king. Imagine being unable to speak freely even in your own chambers, knowing that every word could be twisted and used against you. This fostered an intense sense of paranoia and isolation, making true trust a luxury you could rarely afford. You'd learn to speak in riddles to keep your true thoughts hidden, even from those seemingly closest to you. Bribery and corruption were common tools of palace intrigue. Your rivals might attempt to bribe your staff for information, or even bribe royal officials to sabotage your policies or tamper with documents. Conversely, you might find yourself needing to offer bribes to secure information, gain support, or simply ensure your own survival. It was a murky world where loyalty was often bought, not earned. The stakes of this betrayal were incredibly high. If a rival successfully undermined you, the consequences could be catastrophic. You could lose your position, your wealth, your lands, and your freedom. You might be imprisoned, exiled, or even executed, accused of treason or incompetence. Imagine losing everything you'd worked for, your family stripped of their status, all because of a fabricated accusation or a well-placed lie. This constant threat of utter ruin hung over your head, a chilling reminder of the fragility of your power. While specific details are often exaggerated in chronicles and literary works, the widespread historical accounts of court intrigue across medieval Europe, from the Byzantine Empire to the courts of England and France, firmly establish the pervasive nature of betrayals and plots among advisors. Even the king's own family could be a source of betrayal. Queens, royal siblings, or ambitious princes might form their own factions, working to influence the king or even to replace him. You might find yourself caught in the crossfire of dynastic struggles, forced to choose a side, knowing that backing the wrong horse could lead to your complete destruction. The constant tension and mental strain of navigating this treacherous environment took a severe toll on your health. Sleep would be restless, filled with nightmares of plots and betrayals. Your nerves would be frayed, your stomach constantly churning with anxiety. You'd develop a profound distrust of others, making genuine human connection difficult. Every feast, every social gathering, every quiet conversation was a potential trap, a new test of your vigilance and cunning. You learn to become a master of political maneuvering yourself. You'd cultivate your own network of informants, strategically spread your own rumors, and meticulously gather intelligence on your rivals. Survival in this environment required you to be as cunning and ruthless as those who sought your downfall. You were forced to play the game, or become its victim. So, as you envision the majestic medieval court, remember the unseen battles raging beneath the surface. For the king's advisor, palace intrigue was a pervasive reality, with betrayal lurking everywhere, turning every day into a high-stakes struggle for survival, sanity, and influence. It truly makes you appreciate an honest workplace, doesn't it? You've explored the hidden dangers of palace intrigue and the constant threat of betrayal. But even if you managed to navigate this treacherous landscape, the king's favor was a fickle thing, and a single misstep could lead to a catastrophic downfall, exile, and ruin, the fall from grace. For a medieval king's advisor, displeasing the monarch or losing political favor meant not just losing your job, but often your lands, your wealth, your freedom, and sometimes your very life. Imagine a sudden, chilling summons to the king's private chambers, not for a council meeting, but for an unexpected audience. The king's face is grim, his eyes cold. He informs you, in curt, unyielding tones, that your services are no longer required. Perhaps he believes a rumor spread by your rivals. Perhaps he blames you for a failed policy that was not your fault. Or perhaps he has simply grown tired of your face. The sentence is pronounced with terrifying swiftness: you are dismissed from office. This wasn't just a career setback, it was the immediate beginning of your ruin. Your dismissal usually meant the swift confiscation of your lands, titles, and wealth. Imagine everything you had worked for, every estate, every valuable possession, every piece of silver, instantly seized by the crown. Your family, who had enjoyed the benefits of your power, would suddenly find themselves impoverished, stripped of their status, and often cast out from their homes. This brutal reversal of fortune could happen overnight, leaving you utterly destitute. While the precise extent of land confiscation varied by monarch and period, the legal right of the king to seize the property of disgraced advisors was a powerful tool of control throughout medieval Europe. For many, dismissal was followed by exile. You would be banished from court, often from the kingdom itself, forced to flee to a foreign land with little more than the clothes on your back. Imagine leaving behind everything you knew: your home, your family who might be forbidden to follow, your friends, your entire social world, forced into a life of desperate wandering in unfamiliar lands, always looking over your shoulder for royal agents. This was a form of living death, a profound humiliation that severed all your ties. Even worse, your fall from grace could lead to imprisonment. You might be dragged from your bed in the middle of the night, arrested by royal guards, and thrown into a damp, dark, and rat-infested dungeon. There would be no trial, no formal charges, no hope of release unless the king changed his mind or a powerful ally interceded on your behalf. Imagine the cold, the hunger, the despair of knowing your fate rests entirely on the unpredictable whim of your former master. Your days spent in silent agony, listening to the drip of water and the scuttling of vermin, and for the most egregious perceived offenses, or simply for being too powerful or too much of a threat. The fall from grace could mean execution. Accusations of treason, heresy, or conspiracy often fabricated by your enemies could be leveled against you. There would be no fair trial, no due process. A swift, brutal execution, perhaps a public beheading, would be enacted, not just as punishment for you, but as a terrifying warning to others at court. Imagine knowing your end is near, seeing the axe glinting in the sun, all because you lost the game of courtly politics. Many powerful advisors throughout medieval history met such a grim end, from Thomas Cromwell under Henry VIII to Enguerrand de Marigny under Philip IV. The constant threat of this abrupt and utter ruin hung over every advisor's head, a chilling reminder of the fragility of power. You might work tirelessly, loyally serving the king for years, making immense sacrifices, only for a single mistake, a jealous whisper, or a change in royal favor to undo everything in an instant. This created a profound sense of insecurity and vulnerability that permeated every aspect of your life at court. This terrifying reality forced advisors to live a life of extreme caution, constantly calculating risks, flattering the king, and trying to appease rivals. It meant suppressing genuine opinions if they differed from the monarch's, becoming adept at subtle manipulation, and always placing self-preservation above all else. Your career was a perilous tightrope walk over an abyss. So, as you picture the powerful medieval advisor, remember that their elevated position came with a terrifying price. The fall from grace was a brutal and ever-present possibility, ensuring that a life of immense influence could quickly devolve into exile and ruin, leaving them stripped of everything they held dear, a chilling testament to the arbitrary nature of medieval power. It truly makes you appreciate modern employment contracts and due process, doesn't it? You face the devastating double standard of adultery, a constant threat to a Roman wife's honor and security. But even without such a transgression, the dissolution of marriage itself presented another profound peril: divorce and dispossession, lost children, lost dowry. Unlike many societies where marriage was a lifelong, unbreakable bond, Roman divorce was surprisingly easy, but its consequences, particularly for women, could be harsh and profoundly unequal. Imagine your marriage, perhaps one arranged years ago for political or financial alliance. Over time, that alliance may have soured. Perhaps your husband desires a more advantageous match, or you, as the wife, have failed to produce male heirs. In Republican Rome, and even more so during the Empire, divorce became remarkably accessible. It wasn't a complex legal battle requiring fault or extensive grounds, at least for the husband. often, all that was needed was a simple declaration of intent, either written or verbal, by either the husband or, increasingly, the wife, especially in sin marriages. There was no public shaming or religious condemnation that often accompanied divorce in other ancient cultures. In fact, it became quite common, particularly among the elite, to divorce and remarry multiple times to further political or financial ambitions. However, the ease of divorce masked a deep-seated inequality, particularly for the woman. While a woman could initiate a divorce, especially in a sane manu marriage, where she remained legally tied to her father, her position was often far more precarious than her husband's. Her primary vulnerability lay with the dowry dues. Remember the dowry, that sum of money or property your family contributed at the marriage? It was meant to support you during the marriage and, theoretically, provide for you in the event of divorce. However, the dowry was traditionally managed by the husband. Upon divorce, the dowry was supposed to be returned to the wife or her paterfamilias, but reclaiming it could be a protracted, difficult process. A reluctant or unscrupulous husband might delay payment, challenge the amount, or claim he was entitled to keep a portion for expenses incurred during the marriage. Imagine being a Roman wife, suddenly cast out of your home, and then having to fight a legal battle for the very financial security that was meant to protect you. This made women highly dependent on the good faith of their husbands and the legal acumen of their male guardians. Furthermore, if the wife was found to be at fault for the divorce, for instance, if she committed adultery as we discussed, a crime unique to wives, she could lose her dowry entirely, or a significant portion of it. This placed an immense financial and social burden on the wife, where a single misstep could lead to utter destitution and public disgrace. The threat of losing her dowry was a powerful tool to control a wife's behavior, ensuring her strict adherence to Roman moral codes. And what about the children? This is where divorce became truly disturbing for the younger generation. Roman law was clear: children born of a legal marriage always remained under the patria potestas of their biological father. This meant that upon divorce, the children almost invariably stayed with the father, even if they were infants. The mother, regardless of her maternal bond, had no legal right to custody or even regular access. Imagine being a Roman mother, forced to leave your children behind, knowing you might rarely see them again, as they were legally considered the property of their father and his family. This separation, which seems incredibly cruel to our modern sensibilities, was the accepted legal norm. This practice effectively turned children into pawns in familial disputes and alliances. They were assets for continuing the family line, for securing inheritances, and for forging new political connections. Their emotional well-being was secondary to these broader family interests. A child might witness their parents' separation, then be raised by a stepmother, with little to no ongoing contact with their biological mother. This could lead to deep emotional scars, resentment, and a profound sense of instability for the children involved. While Roman law granted fathers absolute control, historians still debate the practical extent of informal contact between divorced mothers and their children. Though formal custody was almost universally denied to the mother, the ease of divorce also meant a degree of instability within the family unit. While the paterfamilias remained the constant, the composition of the nuclear family could change frequently. Children might grow up with multiple stepmothers and half-siblings, creating complex internal dynamics. For the stepmothers, their role was often challenging, trying to gain the affection and loyalty of children who were legally bound to their biological father. For men, divorce was generally a much simpler affair with fewer repercussions. They retained their children, their property, and could quickly remarry to pursue new ambitions. While social disapproval might exist for excessive divorces, it rarely carried the same stigma or financial devastation as it did for women. So, as you witness the casual nature of a Roman divorce, remember the profound human cost beneath the surface. It was a system that, while offering flexibility for the powerful, often left women dispossessed and vulnerable, and children treated as legal property, severed from their mothers. It's a stark reminder that even in seemingly sophisticated societies, progress in one area like legal flexibility can mask deeply disturbing inequalities in another like family rights. It makes you truly appreciate the concept of shared custody and equitable divorce settlements in our modern legal systems, doesn't it? You've faced the devastating impact of falling from grace and the ever-present threat of exile or imprisonment. But even when you were in the king's good graces and seemingly secure in your position, another set of threats silently undermined your health and well-being: physical hardship, travel, disease, discomfort. The life of a medieval king's advisor was far from the pampered existence you might imagine. It was a constant battle against arduous journeys, unsanitary conditions, and the pervasive illnesses of the age. Imagine your duties. You are constantly on the move, accompanying the king on his peripatetic court. Medieval kings rarely stayed in one place for long, or being dispatched on crucial diplomatic missions to distant lands. Your primary mode of transport is the horse. Imagine spending days, sometimes weeks, in the saddle, riding across rough, unpaved roads that were little more than muddy tracks in winter, or dusty, rutted paths in summer. Your body would ache perpetually, suffering from saddle sores, strained muscles, and bone-jarring jolts. The cold winds, the driving rain, or the scorching sun would beat down on you, with little protection. This constant travel alone was physically draining, a relentless test of endurance. Even if you traveled in a more comfortable carriage, it would be a bumpy, uncomfortable affair on primitive roads, leading to constant jarring and discomfort. Medieval travel was not about luxury, it was about getting from point A to point B, regardless of the physical toll. You'd arrive at your destination exhausted, grimy, and often chilled to the bone. Your accommodations on these journeys were rarely luxurious. You'd often stay in crude roadside inns where cleanliness was an alien concept, or in the often damp and drafty guest chambers of provincial castles. Your bed might be a hard cot, your food simple and often of questionable quality. Imagine trying to get a good night's sleep in an unfamiliar, noisy, and potentially vermin-infested room, knowing you had another day of arduous travel ahead. The omnipresent threat of disease was perhaps the greatest physical hardship. Medieval Europe was a land riddled with invisible killers. Your constant travel exposed you to a myriad of pathogens from different regions. You'd encounter crowded towns with poor sanitation, where diseases like dysentery, the flux, smallpox, and various fevers were rampant. Imagine experiencing a sudden onset of severe diarrhea or a raging fever while hundreds of miles from home, with no access to effective medicine or sterile care. Even if you were in the royal court, conditions were often surprisingly unsanitary. Castles, for all their grandeur, lacked modern plumbing and waste disposal. Human and animal waste often accumulated in courtyards or surrounding moats, creating breeding grounds for disease. Overcrowding in the great halls and chambers, especially during periods of royal residence, facilitated the rapid spread of infections. A persistent cough from a fellow courtier could quickly lead to a full-blown epidemic within the castle walls. While specific mortality rates for royal advisors are difficult to isolate, general medieval demographic studies and chronicles consistently show high rates of death from infectious diseases among all social classes, including the elite, whose frequent travel and close quarters in courts made them particularly vulnerable to contagion. The food, while often plentiful at court, could also be a source of illness. Without refrigeration, food spoilage was a constant concern. You might suffer from bouts of food poisoning from improperly prepared or stored meats. The general lack of hygiene in kitchens and among servants also contributed to the spread of illness. Beyond disease, injuries from travel or accidents were common. A fall from a horse, a broken wheel on your carriage, or a stumble on a slippery stone staircase in a damp castle could lead to sprains, fractures, or deep cuts. Without modern medical knowledge or sterile techniques, a simple injury could quickly fester into a life-threatening infection. Imagine breaking a leg during a journey and enduring agonizing pain for weeks, with only rudimentary care available. The constant physical and mental strain also made you susceptible to chronic ailments. Long hours of work, constant anxiety, poor diet on the road, and perpetual cold or damp could exacerbate conditions like arthritis, digestive problems, or chronic respiratory issues. Your body would slowly wear down, bearing the marks of a life lived on the move and at the mercy of harsh conditions. So, as you picture the wise medieval advisor, remember the invisible battles he fought against his own environment. His elevated status did not exempt him from the harsh realities of his time. His life was one of pervasive physical hardship, marked by relentless travel, disease, and discomfort, ensuring that even at the pinnacle of power, his well-being was a constant struggle against the brutal realities of medieval existence. It makes you incredibly grateful for climate-controlled vehicles and modern hygiene, doesn't it? You've experienced the constant aches of travel and the pervasive threat of disease. But for the medieval king's advisor, your worries extended far beyond your own physical well-being. A terrifying vulnerability lay in your most cherished possession, your family. For a king's advisor, your vulnerable family hostages to fortune were often used as leverage, exposed to royal wrath, and could suffer terrible fates through no fault of their own. Imagine your family, your wife, your children, perhaps even your elderly parents and siblings. They reside in your castle or on your family lands, enjoying the comforts that your high office provides. But this comfort is a precarious illusion. Their very existence is intertwined with your political fortunes, making them unwitting pawns in the dangerous game of courtly power. The most terrifying reality was that your family could become hostages to the king's will. If you displeased the king, fell from favor, or were accused of treason, the consequences would not be limited to you. Your family, legally and socially tied to you, could suffer immediate and devastating retribution. Imagine being imprisoned, knowing that your wife and young children could be thrown into the streets, stripped of their lands and wealth, or even imprisoned themselves. This brutal collective punishment was a powerful tool used by monarchs to control their advisors, ensuring their absolute loyalty and obedience. You might endure immense suffering yourself, but the thought of your family enduring similar pain would be an even greater torment. Your family's vulnerability also made them targets for your rivals at court. If an enemy sought to undermine you, they might target your family directly. This could involve spreading scandalous rumors about your wife's virtue or your children's legitimacy, hoping to bring shame upon your name and erode your standing with the king. Imagine the agony of hearing false accusations against your loved ones, knowing their reputations were being shredded for political gain, and that you might be powerless to defend them. Even worse, that your family could face physical danger. A rival might attempt to kidnap a child for ransom or leverage. A jealous courtier might even arrange an accident for a family member, designed to inflict emotional pain on you or to eliminate a potential heir. The constant threat meant your family lived in a state of quiet anxiety, knowing that their security was directly tied to your precarious position. While explicit legal codes regarding the precise treatment of advisors' families during disgrace varied across medieval kingdoms, historical chronicles are replete with examples of families being dispossessed, imprisoned, or even executed alongside a fallen advisor, emphasizing their extreme vulnerability. Marrying off your children, particularly daughters, also became a strategic rather than affectionate decision. Your daughters were valuable assets in forging alliances with other powerful families, strengthening your own position at court. You would arrange their marriages with a shrewd eye for political advantage, often without regard for their personal happiness. Imagine sending your daughter, perhaps barely into her teens, to marry a powerful but unpredictable noble from a distant region, knowing that her future safety and comfort depended entirely on the stability of that political alliance. The economic reality was also a constant threat. If you lost your position, your family's vast lands and wealth, accumulated through generations, could be swiftly confiscated by the crown. This meant sudden impoverishment, forcing your family from their ancestral homes and into a life of destitution. Imagine the profound humiliation and despair of seeing your wife and children reduced to poverty, all because of your political downfall. This pervasive vulnerability meant that a medieval king's advisor lived with a constant, gnawing anxiety about his family. Every decision he made, every risk he took, every enemy he made at court carried immense repercussions not just for himself, but for those he loved most, their safety, their prosperity. Their very lives were always at risk, held as hostages to fortune by the unpredictable whims of the monarch and the ruthless ambitions of his rivals. This immense personal burden undoubtedly contributed to the crushing stress and precariousness of your life at court. It truly makes you appreciate personal security and stable inheritance laws for your loved ones, doesn't it? You've grappled with the terrifying vulnerability of your family, pawns in the dangerous game of courtly power, but serving a medieval king, navigating the treacherous currents of the court, also demanded that you, as an advisor, often make profound ethical compromises. This was the chilling reality of moral compromise, dirty hands, troubled soul. To maintain your position and protect your influence, you often had to engage in unsavory deeds, leaving indelible stains on your conscience. Imagine a situation. The king requires a new tax to fund a costly war, but the peasants are already starving. Or he wishes to confiscate the lands of a powerful noble who is your rival, but the legal grounds are flimsy at best. Your role as an advisor means you are expected to find solutions to make the king's will a reality. Regardless of the ethical implications, you might be forced to manipulate laws or customs. You might be tasked with interpreting existing laws or manipulating ancient customs to suit the king's agenda, even if it meant bending the truth or twisting justice. Imagine having to construct a flimsy legal argument to justify the seizure of an innocent noble's lands. Knowing it was an act of pure political expediency, fabricate evidence or spread rumors to undermine a rival, to justify a political execution, or to consolidate the king's power. You might be complicit in spreading false accusations, fabricating evidence, or subtly poisoning public opinion. Imagine whispering a carefully crafted lie into the king's ear about a loyal subject, knowing it could lead to their ruin, all to secure your own position. This constant engagement in deceit and manipulation would erode your moral compass, blurring the line between truth and political convenience. While specific written orders for fabricating evidence are rare for obvious reasons, medieval chronicles and legal records often hint at the use of dubious accusations and manipulated testimonies in political trials, suggesting widespread practice. Oversee brutal punishments or tortures if a rebellious noble or a suspected traitor was captured. You might be present during their interrogation, or even tasked with overseeing their brutal punishment or torture to extract confessions or to set an example. Imagine witnessing extreme violence, knowing that your complicity was necessary to maintain your power, or to protect the king's and, by extension, your own authority. This would leave deep psychological scars, haunting your conscience long after the event. Advise on morally questionable wars or policies. The king might seek your counsel on a war of conquest that would bring immense suffering to innocent populations, or a policy that would drastically increase the burden on the common people. While you might personally disagree, your duty was to advise the king effectively, to make his vision a reality. Speaking out too strongly could lead to your own downfall. You would have to compartmentalize that to justify your actions for the greater good of the kingdom, or simply for your own survival. Engage in patronage and corruption. The medieval court operated on a system of patronage, where favors, appointments, and wealth were distributed based on loyalty and influence. To maintain your network and secure support, you might find yourself accepting bribes, granting favors that were not entirely ethical, or overlooking corruption in others. Your hands would become increasingly dirty with the everyday compromises of power. This constant engagement in morally ambiguous or outright reprehensible acts would weigh heavily on your soul. Imagine the sleepless nights, haunted by the faces of those you had wronged, or the memory of the cruelties you had overseen. The pursuit of power, and the desperate need to maintain it, often forced advisors to betray their own principles, leaving them with a profound sense of guilt and inner turmoil. The philosophical and religious ideals of the age, which preached justice, charity, and moral rectitude, would stand in stark contrast to your daily realities. You might attend Mass, hear sermons on the dangers of sin, and pray for your soul, all while actively participating in a system that demanded ruthless pragmatism and ethical flexibility. This internal conflict, this dissonance between your public actions and your private conscience, would be a constant source of stress, a torment for your troubled soul. Your public image might be one of wisdom and piety, a trusted servant of God and King. But beneath that carefully constructed facade, your hands were stained by the compromises demanded by power. You were a master of manipulation, a pragmatist in a brutal world, and the cost was often your own moral integrity. So, as you reflect on the powerful medieval advisor, remember that their influence came at a profound personal price. Their hands were often dirty from the demands of power, their souls perpetually troubled by the compromises they were forced to make. The life of a king's advisor was not just one of political peril, but of profound moral compromise, ensuring that even the most celebrated figures carried a heavy burden of unseen guilt. It makes you profoundly grateful for a clear conscience, doesn't it? You've explored the constant peril of the throne's shadow, the crushing weight of endless toil, the insidious backstabbing of palace intrigue, the devastating fall from grace, the physical hardships of travel and disease, the terrifying vulnerability of your family, and the profound moral compromises demanded by power. As we conclude our journey into the life of a medieval king's advisor, let's reflect on a gilded cage power's bitter price. The prestigious role of royal advisor, far from being a life of unmitigated grandeur, was one of profound stress, constant danger, and immense personal sacrifice. Imagine looking back at your career as a medieval king's advisor, perhaps from the quiet and hopefully safe solitude of your later years. You might recall moments of triumph, a successful diplomatic mission, a crucial victory in war, a wise policy enacted that benefited the kingdom. But these moments of glory would be overshadowed by the pervasive realities of your existence. The most enduring legacy of this life is the constant, debilitating stress and anxiety. Every waking moment was a tightrope walk. The fear of displeasing the king, the paranoia of rivals, the weight of immense responsibility, the threat of sudden and arbitrary punishment, all combined to create a mental and emotional toll that few modern professionals could comprehend. Sleep was elusive, trust a luxury, and genuine peace of mind a distant dream. Your physical health would inevitably suffer, worn down by relentless pressure and the accompanying poor diet, lack of exercise, and exposure to disease. This position was, in essence, a gilded cage. You lived in the opulent surroundings of the royal court, enjoyed immense prestige, and wielded significant influence. But this power came at the cost of your personal freedom, your security, and often, your moral integrity. You were bound to the king's will, unable to truly speak your mind, pursue your own desires, or secure your own future independently. The trappings of power disguised a profound lack of true autonomy. The vulnerability of your family added another layer of unbearable burden. They were your hostages to fortune, their lives and well-being directly tied to your precarious position. The fear of their suffering, whether from confiscation, imprisonment, or even worse, undoubtedly fueled your compromises and intensified your constant vigilance. Your ambition for yourself became inextricably linked with ensuring their survival, a crushing responsibility. Furthermore, the need for moral compromise to maintain favor and power left indelible stains on your soul. The manipulation, the political assassinations, the brutal punishments you might have sanctioned or simply ignored, these were the dirty hands required to navigate the treacherous waters of medieval court politics. The conflict between personal conscience and political necessity would be a constant, internal struggle, ensuring that even moments of success were tinged with a bitter taste. Your entire existence was a precarious gamble. Your rise to power was a testament to your intellect, cunning, and ambition. But your fall from grace, if it came, could be swift, brutal, and total. leaving you in exile in a dungeon or facing the executioner's axe. The lifespan of a king's advisor was often shorter than average, not just from natural causes, but from the very perils of his profession. So, as you reflect on the medieval monarch and his court, remember the silent suffering and immense sacrifices of those who served closest to the throne? The life of a king's advisor was indeed a gilded cage, where power's bitter price was paid not just in ambition and loyalty, but in chronic stress, relentless danger, profound moral compromise, and the ever-present threat of utter ruin. It stands as a chilling reminder that the highest seats of power in the medieval world were often the most miserable and dangerous places of all. All right, as the last echoes of our journey through the perilous life of a medieval king's advisor fade into the quiet of the night, it's time to gently bring our minds back to the present. You've walked through their treacherous courts, felt the weight of their constant fear, and grappled with the profound compromises they were forced to make. It's a powerful reminder that history, in its quietest corners, often reveals the most poignant truths about human ambition and the true cost of power. Let the images of palace intrigue, arduous journeys, and constant anxiety about the king's favor fade away, giving way to the quiet peace that surrounds you. The sense of ancient castles and the tense atmosphere of power fade, giving way to the familiar comfort of your own space. Let any lingering thoughts of moral compromise and lurking dangers drift away, replaced by a sense of ease and peaceful reflection. The struggles and sacrifices of the ancient royal advisors now temporarily become part of your understanding, enriching your sense of history and the value of peace and freedom. As your breathing deepens and your body relaxes, know that the stories of the past are always here, waiting patiently to be rediscovered whenever you seek a gentle escape into the depths of time. But now the journey is complete. Rest easy, knowing that another story has been revealed. Gently, just for you.